Hey, what's up, everyone? Um, I want to make this. I've been wanting to make this video for quite some time because I knew the anniversary of this event was coming up, and it's not a good one. It's the blackest day in the history of wrestling. It has been 10 years since the terrible tragedy involving Chris Benoit and his family. And I want to talk about my experience on that day because I remember it just like it was yesterday. So, I was in grade 4 at the time. I was about 8 years old and I was in love with WWE just as much then as I am now. I loved it to death. I would play the video games, collect the action figures like I kind of do now, and I didn't have pay TV at the time, so what I'd do was I would go onto WWE.com to check the results for Raw, SmackDown, and at the time ECW, just to see what was going on. So I came back home from school one day, and this was when the Vince McMahon death storyline was still going on, where he got blown up in the limo. So I want to see, did they make any more advancements in storyline? Like, what's going on there? So I put my bag in my room, and then I walked to the computer room to check up on WWE.com. I click on the page, and what I see, rest in peace, Chris Benoit. 1967 to 2007. I believe it was 1967. I'm so sorry if I got it wrong. And I was in absolute shock. Like, it's hard to explain how I felt on that day because I was so sad and upset when I heard about Chris Benoit's passing. I didn't have a clue what happened on that day. I just figured he died of a heart attack similar to Eddie Guerrero. And I was extremely upset. Move past to a couple of days. Entertainment Tonight is playing, and I'm talking to my dad, just chatting about what my day was, and then my brother grabs me and he says, "Look, Chris Benoit's on the news." And then I watch Entertainment Tonight, and they explain that Chris Benoit killed his wife Nancy, his son Daniel, and then hung himself. I thought it was a lie at first because my brother told me, and I was extremely angry at him, like, stop lying to me, you're not telling the truth. And that's when I looked on Entertainment Tonight and they said it right there. And I remember crying for for ages after that. Like, for a good couple of days I was devastated because Chris Benoit, I remember Chris Benoit for being one of the most technically gifted wrestlers ever. You know, he just loved wrestling. He was inspired by Dynamite Kid, and that's just all he loved doing was wrestling. Like wrestling underneath a mask as the Pegasus Kid, and then moving on to ECW, wrestling along the lines of with Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko, and then getting signed to WCW. And then when he got signed with WWE with the Radicals, he was definitely a standout guy in that group. I remember the first ever wrestling match I saw was him against The Rock at Fully Loaded 2000. And I just remember how intense of an individual he was inside that ring, you know, with the chops and, you know, the suplexes, the diving headbutts, crippler crossface. He was an intense performer inside that ring. And I'll never forget WrestleMania 20 and watching that, and still to this day, when I watch it, it brings me to tears because after defeating Triple H and holding that World Heavyweight title, Eddie Guerrero, who was also WWE Champion at that time, seeing them embrace and hug inside the ring, because those two have been friends for years, and to see them finally reach the top of what they've been dreaming about for their entire lives. That's inspirational, man. So to see all that, and now because of what he did to his family in the final days of his life, it still hurts. Even 10 years now, it still hurts. And I know WWE tries everything in their power to erase him from their memories, and we all joke about, oh, Steven Richards, replacing Chris Benoit and all that, but they did it for a reason, because the way he ended his life was not reflective of the man he was. He snapped and took it out on his family, realized what he'd done, and unfortunately took his own life. That comes with a lot of things. People blamed steroid abuse for it. I wouldn't be shocked if there was steroid abuse involved in Benoit's life, but I'd say his brain was at the age of like an 88-year-old because of all the concussions he was taking inside the ring with the diving headbutt, which was his finishing move. Multiple concussions, they take a toll on you, and that definitely took a toll on Benoit. His brain just didn't know what to do, and he just went crazy in his final days, and it hurts as a wrestling fan because of all of the amazing matches that man had against so many other people. And for now, like, we can never talk about that triple threat match he had with Triple H and Shawn Michaels again. We can't talk about the ladder match he had with Chris Jericho. We can't talk about the match he had with Kurt Angle. There are so many moments that included Chris Benoit, especially in the early 2000s. He was such an integral part of the Ruthless Aggression era, in my opinion, and because of the final days of his life, we can't really talk about that anymore, which, it hurts. It really does. So, as a Chris Benoit fan myself back in the day, to see people arguing, saying, oh, he's a monster for what he did, and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be debated until the end of time, pretty much. But I wanted to get my thoughts on this 10-year anniversary. It's not really that anniversary, because it's a terrible tragedy. It's the blackest days in the history of wrestling, in my opinion, and I hope we never, ever see anything like this again. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.